All right. Today is Thursday, March the 9th, 2023. It's 4 o'clock, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Environmental Advisory Committee to order. I would also like to mention that the press and the public have been notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the previous meeting's minutes. Are there any additions or, yes?
I have one. The item number 3, it says Laura Russ, and her name is Lauren, L-A-U-R-E-N, Rust, R-U-S-T.
All right.
And she's mentioned as Ms. Russ later in that paragraph. That could be Rust as well. I know it's hard to know when somebody just says their name. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more amendment, I guess. Under the discussion of litter goals, goal number 3 was about getting neighborhoods involved. I'm sorry, I don't have a copy right here. But one of the things we talked about was maybe getting volunteers from each neighborhood to serve as captains for litter. And that seemed to be an idea that was discussed, and I'd like to add that in there. It's all, well,
I was just
item number 3 says implement community cleanups biannually to encourage the full-time residents to clean up their neighborhoods. In conjunction with that, it was about getting volunteers from each neighborhood to serve as a captain or.
I can add it in. I just kept it consistent by pulling everybody's just immediately first goal.
Okay.
But I'll add that in. The other thing, while I have the microphone, if I could ask you guys, even though we can hear you, and I can hear you even if you're not in it, YouTube can't hear you. So please make sure that you are in the microphone when you're speaking so that it picks up on YouTube. Thank you.
And I would, on the microphones, just add that because of audio problems we've had, we used to have a system that would mute certain microphones when another one was being used. That's gone away, so we're picking up more ambient sound, so it's not, so anything under your breath will be caught, but we need everybody to kind of stay close and just not chat away from when you should be speaking, because it's all being captured now, where it wasn't prior to this meeting. Thank you.
Any other comments or additions to the minutes or corrections? I'd like to make a motion that the minutes be approved as amended.
A second.
Okay. Next item of business is citizens. Oh, yeah, we do have vote. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next item on the agenda is citizen comments, and I'm not aware that we have any citizen comments tonight. I know we have some presentations.
Nobody has signed up for citizens' comments.
Okay. Item number 4 on the agenda is a presentation about Charleston County greenhouse gas audit, and that is Ariel Gerstein. Did I say that correctly? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for, I don't know if you can hear me on this microphone, for having me. I'm Ariel Gerstein. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator with Charleston County. So Belvin asked me if I could present on the inventory that I did it was for the entire county, but Isle of Palms is also included. So I'm going to talk about the county in general at first, and then go into some more specifics about Isle of Palms. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go over some just like very basics in terms of a greenhouse gas inventory, and apologies in advance if you guys, I know you're the environmental committee, so you might already know this. So sorry if it's repetitive, but basically what is a greenhouse gas inventory? So we're measuring greenhouse gas emissions in a specific geographic area over a given time frame. I'm going to go over later what that was for my inventory, and we look at carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, and I'm going to tell you guys what that means. Okay, so what are carbon dioxide equivalent emissions? So you might know that in greenhouse gas emissions, although we generally talk about carbon, there's other greenhouse gases. So here these are not all of them. These are like the big three: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Um, so basically, we need a way to compare apples to apples, these greenhouse gases to each other. So we look at the global warming potential of different greenhouse gases. So as you can see, methane and nitrous oxide have a much higher global warming potential than carbon dioxide. The global warming potential is a measure of how much energy the emissions of 1 ton of gas will absorb over a given period of time. It's usually like 100 years, it can vary, relative to the emissions of 1 ton of carbon dioxide. And so this inventory, I focused on these three. Some other inventories will focus on fluorinated gases, which in terms of the global warming potential is thousands or tens of thousands of years, for the global warming potential. So these are the three in my inventory. Okay, some more information about greenhouse gases. So as discussed on the last slide, the county's greenhouse gas inventory focused on carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. As you can see from the pie chart, carbon dioxide makes up a majority of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So this is the latest EPA figure, 79%, followed by methane, 11%, nitrous oxide, 7%, fluorinated gases, 3%. So this is one of the reasons that we focus so much on carbon dioxide reduction, because it's the most prevalent in the atmosphere. So these gases stay in the atmosphere for varying amounts of time. As you can see here, carbon dioxide stays the longest of the three listed here. And so even though it has a lower global warming potential, it stays in the atmosphere a really long time, and there's a lot more of it than the other gases. So this is why, even though we say greenhouse gases, a lot of times the focus is on carbon. But when we talk about greenhouse gases, we're not actually just talking about carbon. So just kind of wanted to make that, that point. Just a little bit of information about how these come into our atmosphere. So carbon, the main way, burning fossil fuels, solid waste, trees, other biological material. There is some, it's naturally in the atmosphere, and also there's a lot more of it because of human activities. Methane, of course, you're probably most familiar with methane from landfills, so it's coming from agriculture. Nitrous oxide mainly comes from industry and agriculture. And unlike the other greenhouse gases, fluorinated gases really don't have any significant natural sources. So they've basically come from our activities as humans. And they're basically coming from industrial processes like aluminum, semiconductor manufacturing. And feel free to stop me if you have questions, and I can take questions at the end too. Okay, so this is kind of back to elementary school science. Just a little information. So how do greenhouse gases affect the climate? So I'm just going to go over this phenomenon known as the greenhouse effect. So what is a greenhouse effect? So basically, it's when naturally occurring gases are dispersed in the atmosphere and trap solar radiation. So this is a normal process that happens. The issue with climate change and the increase of greenhouse gases is that our science shows us that human activities are increasing the concentration of these naturally occurring gases, which basically intensify the natural greenhouse effect, and they cause global average surface and lower atmospheric temperatures to rise. So that's what we are currently experiencing now. Okay, so a little information about the inventory in general. So I said before that, so inventories always look at a certain time frame. So for this one, I started this position in 2021, so I decided to look at 2018 and 2020. So we have a base year, and then you have another year or multiple years that you're comparing the base year to see if there's an increase or decrease in emissions. For the geography, so the county is a little bit tricky compared to a city, so this is why there's so many geographies happening. So I did Charleston County government operations, and all the municipalities within the county. And I'll explain on the next slide as to why I chose to do all the municipalities. The sectors that were covered, so buildings, transportation, waste, carbon sequestration, which essentially is things that absorb carbon, so remove carbon from the atmosphere, unlike the other sectors which add carbon. So if you think of trees, absorb carbon, that would be carbon sequestration. That was included in the Charleston County inventory, and then fleet and our employee commute were specific to government operations. Okay. So, why did I include the cities and towns? So, and this is kind of why I'm here to talk to you guys today, so as you probably all know, Charleston County, we only have jurisdiction over our unincorporated areas. So greenhouse gas emissions and air does not work like that. It doesn't understand, geographic boundaries. So it's really important that we all can collaborate on climate action. So that was the reason that I decided to do the municipalities. Although, to be honest, it was a lot more work, and I don't know if it'll be repeated in the future. But the idea was really just to give you guys as local governments the data, and you can pursue activities what you want with it. If you see the data and you want to do projects, you want to do energy efficiency projects on your buildings or solar or whatever it may be, you have the starting point to do that. So that's really the only point of doing it is just information sharing. So that is what I will talk a little bit about today. So this is just the general, this is the county level, this is not Isle of Palms yet, greenhouse gas emissions. So it's 2018 compared to 2020. Obviously the scale is very off because the green bar is county and the blue bar is government. So government always makes up a very small percentage of obviously full county emissions. But it's important that we track that because we have a lot more say over our emissions than the county as a whole. So it's important that we know that. Interestingly enough, we did see a decrease in overall county emissions from 2018 to 2020. We saw a very small increase in government emissions. I could go into my guesses as to why this is. I can't give like a full explanation. And two things that I want to mention is our energy mix in Charleston has drastically shifted from coal to natural gas. So that could be one of the reasons why we're seeing a decrease. Of course, if a shift doesn't continue to renewable, then we won't continue to see a decrease. It'll just be a one-time decrease, and then it'll, basically flatten out. Another reason is, of course, 2020 was peak COVID year, so there could be things related to that, whereas there wasn't as much transportation emissions or building emissions from people being at work. So, so that is the county level. Okay, so on to the municipality. So this is a really kind of confusing map of Charleston County. It has all the municipalities in a different color. You can see Isle of Palms there in that like off red color. All the white space is the unincorporated area. So as you can see, trying to do climate planning in this environment can be tricky. So just wanted to kind of point that out as this is kind of like what we're dealing with on the county level. In terms of the inventory for the municipalities, so I did use energy data from every municipality, whether it was Berkeley, Dominion, or a combination of both. So I was able to get residential, commercial, and industrial in the cases where there was industrial energy use. So electricity and natural gas. For transportation and waste, it was a little trickier because I didn't have that at a municipality level. So for transportation, I had data for municipalities over 25,000 people. So of course, yours does not apply to that. So I was forced to use some weighting for that. And the same with the landfill data is I had solid waste data at the county level. I did not have it at the municipality level. It doesn't exist. So I had to weight that data. So just keep that in mind as, it's not a perfect science here within these inventories, and you don't always have the data exactly that you want, but kind of just make do with the best you can. Okay, so on to Isle of Palms. So sorry, this is a little small, I realize. Okay, so Isle of Palms. So when Belvin contacted me, he had said, you guys had like fairly high emissions. That is true. You're not the second highest. Kiowa was higher. And so, I used residential and commercial electricity data. There was no industrial. It was all from Dominion. About 80% of the energy use is coming from residential use for Isle of Palms. And then another thing that I wanted to point out with these numbers is you can see there's a reduction. There was a reduction for every municipality. But, the per capita emissions, I think, is really tricky to calculate for towns like yours or cities and towns like yours that have a lot of tourism in certain times of the year. Because when we calculate per capita, we use census numbers, which count full-time residents, right? So the denominator is full-time residents and snowbirds or whoever has a house here and is renting it out. We're not counting them, even though the house might have full-time energy use. They might not be counted as a resident. And there's really no way to account for that because tourists come various times of the year, and we just don't have that data. So I just wanted to point that out, that it was a little bit of a case like for you guys as well as Kiowa and some of the other beach areas where people congregate at certain times of the year and then leave. That's a little bit of a caveat on this data. So just wanted to point that out. But in general, I think that some of the other factors that contribute to the higher emissions level compared to some of the other municipalities, and just keep in mind per capita, your emissions are not high in terms of total, but per capita is just potentially, you have a larger commercial district than some of the other areas, so that energy use, and, home size, things like that. So that all contributes. And I also thought like this pie chart is interesting because it shows the total emissions for the county broken up by municipality. So as you can see, of course, like Charleston, North Charleston, Mount Pleasant, they all have the highest, which isn't really surprising because, they have a much larger number of people. In addition, Charleston, North Charleston, Mount Pleasant all have industrial energy usage. So that really brings them up in terms of being high on that list. And so you guys are included in the all other cities, towns, which only makes up 7% of the total emissions. So just to kind of put that in perspective with the per capita. Sorry, went too far. And that's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions. And I will say right now, the county is in the very early stages of climate action planning at the county level. So if anyone wants to help with that, then let me know, and always looking for help with that.
First of all, thank you for coming in.
Sure, no
and
problem.
Detailing all of that for us. Could you just take a second? So you mentioned the county is starting the planning.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to share with us yet on timeline we can expect, or is it too early for that?
Yeah, so I'll say, we're working with consultants. So we just brought a consultant on board, and we also just started a resilience and sustainability advisory committee. You might be familiar with this from the city of Charleston. It's basically the same committee, but just at the county. So we're working with that committee to kind of get things rolling. I don't think it's going to be a very quick process. I think it's probably going to be at least a year until we're complete, because we want to be able to have a plan that's going to work for everyone and get approved and all those things. So right now, we're basically we're doing some engagement. We're at the pre-engagement stage of the plan. So
I have a
Yeah.
quick question,
Absolutely.
Ariel. Linda Plunkett. Thank you. It's really fascinating that you're starting almost from ground zero to collect all this
thanks. Yeah.
data.
Took a while.
And even with the caveats and the asterisks
Yeah.
and so forth, it's still eye-opening. And I understand that you are continuing to get the data collection and the plan formulation, especially with the climate action. So with that, based on your experience, what are some of the things that we as a committee for our community might be doing proactively at this point?
Yeah, I mean, so there's things you can do as a local government if you focus on your own like inventory, I guess, in terms of like on your property you can put, and I don't know what's in your property if it's just this building or other buildings. You know, you can do energy reduction, you can do solar, there's things you can do with electric vehicles. I would say right now there's a lot of money coming from the federal government and specifically tax incentives that haven't existed like ever for local governments that are really appealing for solar and energy. And I'm happy to share. They're still kind of just piecemealing the information down to us, unfortunately. And there's also tax, like really strong tax incentives for residential. I think it's solar. There might be energy efficiency too. I don't know if this is applicable to you guys at all, but they're also doing a lot with affordable housing in terms of making that more energy efficient. So there's a lot of money out there for this kind of work right now. I mean, if you're interested in that, but yeah, I think the main thing in terms of if you want to focus on buildings would be energy reduction. I think the other category, transportation, can be trickier.
Especially for us.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot, we're car centric here, so I think that that is going to require at a higher level to do, kind of BCD cog, doing transportation plans. So I don't know if I have much to say about that, but I think the easiest thing to focus on is energy reduction and renewable energy.
Which is kind of interesting for us because we continue to build bigger and bigger and bigger houses on the island, which are going to consume more electricity, cover more space, generate more water
Great.
runoff, consume more water, consume more wastewater. So, I mean, it is going to be the mobile sources and the heating home probably on this island are probably the two biggest sources, right?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How did we compare? I noticed on the pie chart that about 30% of our emissions come from transportation.
Yeah.
And how do we compare to other cities, municipalities in that category? Or do you have that information available?
Usually transportation in general for inventories is a larger percent than what it was showing with yours. And I think that's probably because of the weighting issue that we had. I actually think transportation is probably higher than it's showing for you guys.
Okay.
Okay, I
I
think
kind of along the transportation lines, I wanted to get a little bit into the detail of how that was calculated. Where do you go for that source?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for this, there's a couple ways you can do it. BCD cog has a travel demand model, which I did not use because ICLEI, which is like this organization that basically oversees local governments and inventories, advised me to use, it's called Google EIE, Environmental Insights Explorer. And for counties or municipalities, you can have access to, it's not just transportation, but lots of different data. So I was able to get county transportation, and it shows basically like the miles driven, and then you're using that you convert it to these carbon dioxide emission equivalents.
So if the miles driven is derived from what? I mean, are they like looking at the number of gallons of gas that were pumped out at the Circle K across the street and the average miles per? Like, I'm just.
I'm not. To be honest, I'm not sure how they calculate it.
Okay.
They have there's different numbers for you split it between gas and diesel, but other than that, I'm not. I'd have to look more into how they calculate it. And that's why I'm saying that I think it's not 100% accurate, because I was weighting it based on your population. And so I think that, the Mount Pleasant number and the North Charleston, they have their own numbers. So I think those are more accurate than the weighting, but there just wasn't the data available.
So if you were just using the average numbers, it probably doesn't take into consideration the tourist factor here, or the cars that are coming in to use the beach. So we probably have a higher mobile component than other communities, potentially other beach communities that.
You might have higher emissions, but it probably almost equals with the per capita, because you have like a higher population at certain times of the year.
Yeah.
So it gets complicated is unfortunately the problem. It's not, you try to be exact as you can, but there's all these caveats, as I said, so.
Yeah, it's not a simple science. There's a lot of assumptions, and there's
Yeah.
a lot of clearinghouse information that's collected, and there is some third-party verification, validation of the emission factors and the assumptions and all, but it's still.
Right.
Did you say that you have the specific data for the 3 major municipalities on transportation, but the smaller one, do you just average it out?
Yeah, so any municipality over 25,000 in population you can get. So I think it was just North Charleston, Mount Pleasant, and Charleston,
Okay.
and the county. So I think they just feel like they can't be accurate when it's such a small area. But yeah, and I mean, I will say, like, these inventories are, I mean, they've, some areas have had them in place for 10 years, but they're still relatively new. And so we still kind of, it's a trial and error situation as we go, and we hope to continue to improve them as, we calculate throughout the years.
Do you think there'd be some way to implement car counting technology with our coastal communities where we track the number of cars coming in and having some sort of Seattle tourism model that would make sense?
We do have a lot, I mean, the DOT gives us a lot of data in terms of traffic counts. I don't know how that would work into this inventory, but we certainly get a lot of traffic data from the DOT. We used to get our own data as well, but we found that the DOT's is good enough that we feel like we have a good handle, at least on and off. When it comes to internal circulation, we don't have great data, but we at least kind of know daily trips on and off the island, which may be useful.
So do you get the number of cars, or you get actually what they're doing? Like the number of miles they're driving?
We get the number on and off the island. We don't know.
Okay.
Once they get on the island, we don't know if they
I think the
stop.
challenge is,
See, the emissions, like, you
the
really need a point A
calculation.
to point B.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, we
that's,
do not.
Yeah, they
Which
use,
is-
it's generally miles that they're
Yeah.
using, or if you're a fleet, they look at fuel consumption as the other one. But for like this, just counting number of cars wouldn't get you to a carbon number like you're saying.
I mean, you could pick a midpoint, you could pick a midpoint on the island. I mean, it's not a big island.
right, yeah.
Most you could probably do is 3 miles, right? Like there, Mac.
Yeah,
But
So-
the intention of most of these numbers, though, right, they're really intended as a baseline for then carbon mitigation efforts, right?
Yeah, so the whole point is you say this is my emissions, and then for the climate action plan, like the city did, you say, okay, and you do always have generally a short-term and long-term goal. So by 2035, I want a 65% reduction in emissions, and then basically everyone now is doing the net zero to 2050, because I think it's far out enough that
They'll be dead.
it's
and they
someone
won't have to
else's
worry about
problem.
them.
No, but
It's unfortunate, but it's, I mean, they are long-term goals.
yeah, they're
These
very
things-
long-term goals. So you try to make a more achievable short-term one, and the reality is that if you pick a number like 65% or 50%, then you really can't do that without incorporating renewables. There's no way to do it. So that's what the climate action plan will hopefully be for the county. And then, if this is what I think is tricky with the environmental issues and local government is we have these jurisdictions, but the environment doesn't. So, it's important that we can work together on this stuff.
Yeah, Belda, we've kind of tabled a climate action plan or a climate
Well,
statement.
the
right?
resolution.
The resolution was.
Stalled out, but I have some things I want to talk about today in terms of concrete climate action from our group. So, yeah, building off of that to then take the mitigation aspects.
Okay.
Thank you for the work you're doing. and
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Yes,
coming
thank you so
tonight.
much.
Thanks for letting me
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you for
volunteering your
coming.
time.
Yes.
Much appreciated.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here, Ariel. Next on the agenda, we have a presentation from our Isle of Palms cleanup crew. And it looks like Susan Hill-Smith is going to be our presenter. But we also have Linda Rowe and Howard Hogue. Is that right?
So I'll go first.
Okay.
And then Linda is actually going to do the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm just going to kind of go through the report that was in your packet. So this will be a review of 2022 and kind of a look forward to 2023. And so, yeah, Susan Smith, or Susan Hill Smith, co-founder of Isla Palms Cleanup Crew and a resident of Isla Palms. First, I'll start out by pointing out that we, just in summary, we really upped our game last year. And so we saw an increase in our litter count of 130% from 26,339 litter items in 2021, which was our previous high, to 60,487 in 2022. But that should not be interpreted necessarily to say that we have a lot more trash than we, or a lot more litter than we used to. It is really correlated to the fact that we have increased our number of litter sweeps, essentially doubling them, and then so we've got a lot more participants, a lot more sweeps, and kind of expanded our coverage area as well. And we know all this, we have this data thanks to our partners and friends at South Carolina Aquarium, who have been with us since the very beginning, since the very first litter sweep we ever did. They have been there to help us and collect data with their litter journal, which has a slightly new name if you've, they've simplified it to Litter Journal. So Isla Palm Cleanup Crew litter sweeps account for, oh, I'm sorry, let me backtrack. We're not the only ones who are collecting data. So the Litter Journal is available really to anybody who goes out and wants to be a citizen scientist and document the trash that they're collecting. And so the total litter count that was logged in the journal for 2022 was 105,000. Well, actually a little bit over that. And so of that data set, 54% comes from Isla Palms Cleanup Crew last year. And then solo sweeps by Howard Hogue, otherwise known as Beach Santa, who is also here with us today. That he alone accounts for 36% of that data. And I say that he comes to our sweeps now more as a greeter and a leader who talks to the groups. He no longer does his own collecting during our sweeps, so that 36% is what he's doing independently on his own. So I think that's definitely worth some extra recognition. So this year, one of the big things that we did was that we started collecting trash more in an organized fashion, not just on the beach, but we added litter sweeps, what we call a breakfast club on Wednesday mornings. So historically, we've always kind of been based around a Monday night litter sweep schedule, which we continued with this year or last year, but we also added in these breakfast club sweeps that were more targeted to the commercial area. So overall, our total included more than 60,000 items from the beach and more than 44,000 items from roads, sidewalks, parking lots. That's all mostly at Front Beach, mostly centered around the city parking lots, not the county park. We really didn't get in there. And then Linda is, when she gets up, is going to give you a little more detailed information about our stats. Just to review, as I mentioned, we had an expanded schedule. This is our most comprehensive schedule. So generally, we had about 45 litter sweeps last year. We added a new spring cadence of spring litter sweeps that included special welcome sessions, and that was great for groups, for newcomers, students, to get them set up for volunteering through the rest of the year. Our Monday night sweeps continued weekly, Memorial Day to Labor Day. I've already mentioned the Breakfast Club sweeps. We also did some special things this past year that we hadn't done in the past, and that included partnering with Charleston County Public Library's Poe and Wando branches with their summer reading programs, and that included having a special guest appearance by Angela May a co-author of the New York Times best-selling series for young readers, The Islanders, with our resident author, Mary Alice Monroe. We also fully joined forces with Isle of Palms Police Department, which we kind of helped out a little bit with each other before. They would always have a post-July 4th morning sweep, and this time we really got together and did good litter documentation on, I think really for the first time. Let's see. On average, we were seeing about 45 people coming out to our Monday night sweeps each time. It varied up and down, and sometimes we would have as many as 80 to 90. I think we are going to continue to see even bigger crowds based on just the inquiries that we're getting. There's a lot of interest from businesses as well as students, but business groups that are bringing they're doing more with volunteering in an organized way. And we are an appealing, easier, I think, opportunity for them to get together. And I guess we're fun, so. Let's see. I want to give a shout out to South Carolina Federal Credit Union. Their Team Blue was so energized that they actually worked satellite location for us during our Monday night sweeps, many of the times doing Breach Inlet kind of independently, which was nice. It gave us a little more, so starting at Breach Inlet and coming around and giving us a little more coverage, so we weren't just around Front Beach. Plus, we also started doing some special sweeps with some larger groups out of the Coastal Retreat Center, which is at 21st Avenue. So they were very gracious to let us use their parking area, which allows another meeting spot with free parking for some of these other sweeps. And so that gave us an opportunity to go up farther, up into the 20 avenues. And we also had a mega sweep with Bishop England High School in August, which involved busing in 200 participants. They reached out to us for, I think, a special volunteering day that they do school-wide. We got all of their sophomores, essentially, came through, along with some teachers and chaperones. And again, our aquarium partners were right there with us. We have multiple locations, not just Front Beach, but also the county park, all the way up to the rec center. So that was a lot, but they brought a good energy. And we had better branding. I can't remember whether I showed you this officially, but we have our buckets now. We've got T-shirts that we got kind of middle of the summer. We have these lovely T-shirts that are made of sustainable materials, including recycled plastic. So each shirt is the equivalent of about 6 recycled water bottles. We also were able to, well, really one of the big things was that the city opened up an area for us where we could meet much more easily. It's now a nook that we have between the restroom building that has the IOP mural and wildlife murals on it, and the showers, and it's nicely landscaped. Before, it was kind of this empty, gated off spot that nothing was really going on. Now it's, people can use it through the day, but it's a great meeting spot for us and allows us to talk to larger groups, have our supplies all set up. It just makes life a lot easier, as does having the key to the restroom supply closet, so we can put our stuff in there instead of lugging it back and forth. So all of that happened last year and made it so much easier to get things accomplished. I think I've talked to you guys before about our No Toys Left Behind bin that we put in that space. Mm-hmm. It was very well used, things in and out. So we know that the toys were coming in and then people were coming by. and reusing them. So hopefully we're getting that cycle in more of a positive direction, and not getting just having all that stuff hit the trash can. And our 2022 toy litter total was 1,567. So that's a taste of what just we're picking up, the toys. We added the fill-a-bag bucket station with one of a local realtor essentially added, kind of collaborated with us on, but she essentially brought it and worked with Public Works too. So anybody can really at that point grab a bucket and go pick up trash any time of the day. Palmetto Pride was great. You guys helped us connect with them. They funded a lot of these buckets, more pickers, clipboards, and then we distributed about 350 of our t-shirts. And I've included all the different people who are listed on the t-shirt, their partners, their sponsors. We have a lot to be thankful for. Volunteers can go to restaurants afterward and get a discount. All those restaurants have been very lovely and gracious to let our volunteers come by. Looking ahead, we're going to follow a similar schedule in 2020 as we did in 2022. I personally expect to see an increase in even more in the numbers. We're getting just such positive response from schools, and I think it's just, and businesses. We've got a great group of regulars, and I think we've done a pretty good job of getting the word out. So we will probably, if we have more larger groups that want to come, steer them more to that 21st area to kind of get more coverage up there. We're moving forward with plans to become an official 501c3. As the season starts, requesting that the city cover the cost of replenishing our supply of t-shirts and our magnets, which are essential in providing a way for volunteers to receive free parking while they are here. And I've mentioned in the past our plans to reimagine that area even more into an engaging outdoor educational exhibit with conservation messaging. We will call it IOP Conservation Station. I did not get very far in that last year because we were kind of busy. But hoping to get back on track with that this year. We already have I'm not sure if I shared this with you before, but this is a design kind of rough draft that somebody from the aquarium, the design team at the exhibit design team at the aquarium kind of came up with for us to get started with. That is not a firm plan, but something that we can help guide us. Thank you, Public Works, for adding more cigarette butt receptacles last summer. I think those are going to be very helpful. I can't remember exactly when they went in, but they had some nicely branded ones from Surfrider. And I'm not sure if you guys were involved with that. If you were, then thank you, because we really needed that. And we'll hopefully see a difference. I feel like that happened later in the season, so I'm expecting to hopefully see a difference this summer from that. And thank you for the new turtle signs that you included litter messaging in. Recommendations for you guys to think about and hopefully the city to kind of work on would be, we've talked about this before, and at this stage, I think we need more enforcement by city beach service officers during the busy season. Litter-related ordinance violations, especially smoking. That is the easiest violation to spot. And that is part of the reason why we added a no smoking law, was that it is difficult to see someone in the act of littering. It's pretty easy to see somebody in the act of smoking. And I personally feel like warnings would do a lot. I don't know that it's time to start handing out a lot of fines, but I think we are at a place where we've seen a leveling off in, we've seen a great reduction, and Linda will talk about that, in the percentage of items that are smoking related. And we did it by percentage rather than count, because we've obviously are still collecting a lot, and even more now because we got more people out. But if you look at the percentages, we've seen a good reduction, but we've plateaued, I feel like. And I think I've heard that the city has looked at the possibility of having the BSOs be more out on the beach, and having parking become a contracted effort, so that BSOs are redirected out to work on the beach and make sure that things are going well out there. And they could very well at that point do more to be targeting smoking and that kind of thing. I'm hoping that happens sooner than later. I think that maybe other people of the city would like it to happen sooner than later, but it may be more complicated. I think adding personnel funding for public works to spend on routine litter cleanup is something that should be discussed. There is, I believe, at least one person who part of his duties are to us, a paid employee, to clean up in the city area of the commercial district and along all the parking areas all the way down to in the 50s. But I don't think it's probably enough, and would encourage that is something that the city should take more ownership of, and especially in the commercial district, where in the parking areas the city is making quite a bit of revenue from parking and from people coming to visit. We will look at adding more no toy left behind bins. We'd also recommend that the city have consistent inclusion of litter and no smoking messaging in beach access signs with the tiles, and continue to have that good messaging on the welcome boards when people come onto the island, but keeping it simple. I think we could both do more to engage with the businesses and best practices. Let's see, more social media messaging. I'm thrilled that the city is going to be having a PR person coming on board who could maybe assist with that.
That person's here today and started yesterday.
Yay!
Welcome.
Awesome.
Everybody, this is Chandra, the city's newest employee, started yesterday morning, so
Wonderful.
excited to have her.
Yay.
Welcome.
That was news to me. Well, I guess I knew you were coming, but yes, thank you. One thing I learned that I did not know until we started collecting trash more in the streetscape is that the beach company, I believe, and Douglas, correct me if I'm wrong, has some ownership of keeping the trash cans that are along the businesses right there on Ocean Boulevard. And
Right next, adjacent to the red roof buildings?
Yes.
Yes, those are the beach companies.
And so and Howard can maybe talk more about this. There was definitely, they could be doing more to empty those on a regular basis, often becoming overflowing by the end of the weekend. We were starting to work with Ben and Jerry's on that before Ben and Jerry's wound up.
We were aware of
yeah.
overflow problems, and I know Donnie had been in contact with their property manager about it, and I think I think it was Ben and Jerry's specifically that was
they
most
were very
problematic.
busy. Well,
Yeah.
because they had so many people coming through to get ice cream.
So we are aware of it, but if and we've tried to address it, but I would say if you see something concerning, let us know.
And
we'll
now,
certainly-
that dynamic has obviously changed because
Right.
Ben and Jerry's isn't there, and
Right.
it's something going in anytime
Yes,
soon.
another ice cream place from
Shaka Shake?
yeah, from also from Sherry Johnson.
Okay.
who's the tenant and in the adjacent buildings.
Okay. Okay. Well, I feel like we need to get together with them more and make sure they understand the volume of trash that is spilling out
Right.
of those cans.
Yep.
And in the future, I can see us working more with short-term rentals and hotels on consistent litter messaging. And then, if we are not seeing any in the commercial area off of the beach, by the shops and in the roadways and the parking lots, that area, 44% of litter items are smoking related. So that area, except I think maybe the parking zones have been marked for no smoking, the city parking areas. But otherwise, it's technically not, smoking's allowed in those areas, but we just need to do more to make sure that people are using the receptacles that are now should be pretty easy. I mean, there's also a lot of trash cans around too, honestly. But if we don't see a significant reduction, then we could potentially, might want to look at a no smoking ban in that area. But I feel like we need to see whether those receptacles that have been put out are helpful, especially the surf rider ones and the other ones that I feel like are pretty attention getting. So, and then I will hand that off to Linda.
Just a minute.
Oh, sorry.
I want to thank you and acknowledge all of your efforts. I know this is something you've been working on for more than a year, and I know you have lots of little helpers with it, but you have been the spearhead, Susan.
Thank you.
And have done so much, and this is a great report. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And I hope that the pictures that we added convey the fun and spirit that we have when we are out there. We do have wonderful people who come out to help us, and we try to make it picking up trash and litter enjoyable.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Where would this potentially be placed? What would be the proposal for the location of this display?
So that is actually in the spot where we check in. It is, so if you're walking, if you turn at Smugglers, you go use that beach access in between the city restroom building with the IOP mural and Smugglers and Coconut Joe's.
Mm-hmm.
Once you pass the restroom building, there's a space there before you get to the showers.
Okay.
And it's geared for that space.
Okay.
Susan, I had just one quick comment, or two quick comments. One was, if there are particular locations where you identify a lot of cigarette litter, not cigarette butts and things like that, where there are no butt canisters, if you will let us know, and then maybe we can look into getting something installed there. And the second thing that I wanted to mention is you had something in here about speaking to the Chamber of Commerce. And if that's something that you wanted to do together, I would be happy to collaborate with you on that.
That would be wonderful, yes. I do feel like I want to see us working more collaboratively with the businesses, and really talking about best practices and that kind of thing, and getting them on board in a positive way instead of a forceful way. So, thank you.
Susan, do you
Appreciate
want
that.
this back?
I do.
Okay.
I think we should keep that in mind with other proposals for different displays, educational displays, and thinking about what might make sense where and kind of the overall look of these things. So, thanks.
Thank you, Susan, and I echo the thanks that I have been. Before I was working at the aquarium, I was volunteering, and I have been at many an Isle of Palms cleanup crew evening Monday night beach sweep, and even since 2018. And Susan has been definitely the driving force behind it. And I personally, and from the aquarium's perspective, thank you for all that you've done. So I'm going to continue this conversation about litter on the Isle of Palms, but I will try to direct you to, let me, if I can figure this out. Let's see, which button is it? Oh, that wasn't it. My name is Linda Rowe. I am the Conservation Programs Coordinator with the South Carolina Aquarium. I work very closely with Kelly Thorvalson, who you all know very, very well, and she's here in the audience with us. So, I'm going to talk to you about the 5 years of data that we have been collecting through many people have been contributing to through the aquarium's litter journal. That is a project within our citizen science app. And the data, the map that you see here is a zoomed in version of Isle of Palms, and each of those hexagons shows a litter observation in the language of the project. And what that means is somebody went out and picked up some litter, and it isn't just one item, it's however many items they picked up at that time that they went out and did their sweep. And each hexagon can represent a single person, or it can represent a group event where many people pooled their data, and that was considered the one observation. As you can see, there are many hexagons on there. They represent more than one, and as they get darker in color, they represent more and more in that specific location. And over 5 years of data collection, as you can see, we have more than almost 350,000 litter items. Individual pieces of debris have been removed and documented in the litter journal. Of course, I can't speak to anybody who went out and picked up litter that didn't document, so there's very likely more litter than that has been picked up over the years. And that includes individuals, as I mentioned, and also groups. And when I say groups, I mean groups like the 10th graders at Bishop England High School, like entire classes from other schools around the area. In fact, the aquarium helped 2 different years in a row, or 2 different years around COVID and the year before. There was a youth group that came from all over many different places, and there was over 300 people, teenagers and their parents, and they spread out across 10 stations in the first year. And that was in 2019, I believe. And so there have been many volunteers, and the total count as of the end of 2022 was 885 sweeps on Isle of Palms by more than 1,000 volunteers. So many of these volunteers are residents, and they come back every week and at every Isle of Palms cleanup crew evening sweep. And some of them are visitors to the island. They only come once, and we'll never see them again because they don't live here, and they bring their family out. Some of them are corporations, like you can see Team Blue there from South Carolina Federal, but lots of businesses in the area will come out and do team building activities at the beach, and they love to do beach sweeps because, as Susan said, it really is a lot of fun. And then some of them are individuals like Howard Hogue, who you can see up there, Beach Santa, who just has a real place in his heart for the Isle of Palms, and he comes out very regularly, routinely, several times a week and does solo sweeps. So, what is the litter? Susan mentioned a good bit of it already, but I'm going to give you the overview. So basically, what I'm going to show you is able to be broken down on the beach, but also on the streetscape. And from what we can tell already, just looking at those 2 areas, there's pretty comparable amounts of plastic is in both those areas. About 3/4 of whatever is picked up is some kind of plastic. And on the beaches, this is just the top 10 for the beach. It's not a comprehensive list. And this does match the table that you have in your packet. And I don't want you to get too hung up on these numbers necessarily, but this is the top 10 items ordered from most to least, and just for 2022. And as Susan already mentioned, cigarette butts is the highest one. It's the #1 item picked up. And, but not everything on this list is plastic. And I'll draw your attention to the paper and cardboard, which is at #3, fireworks, which is at #7, and clothing and shoes and fabric is at #10 on this list. There are other things below that, as I've said before. So this plastic number is actually a conservative estimate, because you all probably know that sometimes fireworks do contain plastic, sometimes clothes do contain plastic. Polyester fabric has plastic in it. So this plastic percentage is actually a conservative estimate. And what's happening on the roads is it's very similar in terms of the percentage of plastic, and it is also very similar in that cigarette butts are the #1 item. And actually, the top 3 are all very similar, although they switch order. But you do see some other things on the road that you don't see much on the beach, like metals and glass bottles or fragments. But speaking of the smoking, Susan already kind of gave away the numbers, and you have them in your packet, so there's no spoiler there. But basically, we categorize smoking, the smoking percentage is not just cigarette butts, because that does contain cellulose acetate, and it is plastic littering, even though a lot of people don't think about it. It's not only plastic, it's toxic chemical-laden plastic, but the smoking total here also includes cigar tips and e-cigarettes. So we're finding basically 1 in every 5 litter items that get picked up on the beach is gonna be one of those smoking debris. And on the roads, it's a little more than 2 in 5. So that's kind of staggering when you think about it. When the Isle of Palms is bordered on both sides by water, and anything on the roads is gonna go down a storm drain and end up in the waterways. So that is startling that there's 44% smoking debris in all the litter that's picked up on the roads. So Isle of Palms, as you all know, has been a leader in the fight against plastic pollution. I have to say, I have to stop and point that out. This municipality was the very first one to put in place a single-use plastics ban for plastic bags. The city voted on that in 2015, and it went into effect January 1st, 2016. It was the very first municipality in South Carolina, and it opened the door, and a lot of other municipalities followed right after that. So that's really, really impressive, and it's really worth tracking what's going on with single-use plastics in this municipality. So currently, the ban on single-use plastics covers styrofoam straws and retail bags. And at this point, based on 2022 alone, island-wide, there's about 9% of the plastic litter is made up of those items. So I'm not gonna say whether that's good or bad. It's a little surprising to me, considering how long the ban has been in place, but we also do have to consider that COVID happened, and we can't forget about that. And a lot of municipalities with single-use plastic bans did kind of relax their enforcement of those bans during that time because of the hardship that it caused. But really, it's 2023, and it's at a time when those other municipalities have made efforts to get back on track with their single-use plastic bans. And similarly with the single-use plastic, we looked at the banned items first, but that's a very narrow definition of single-use plastics. And really, if we widen our focus a little bit, we also want to look at what the other single-use plastics that travel alongside these very often, and that does include the carry-out food and drink litter. So when you look at all of those together, those are making up 12% of the plastic litter that's here on the island as of 2022. So what about the smoking? We talked a little bit about this already. 1 in 5 beach litter items is gonna be a smoking debris of some type, either cigarette butt, cigar tip, or e-cigarette. And if you look at all years from 2018, you can see that it was trending down in every year. We did exclude 2020 because the data collection was so skewed, and even the beach usage was very skewed. So we didn't include those numbers. But as you can see, 2021 and 22 has really kind of held steady at 21%. We don't know why 2018 and 2019 it was already trending down. We don't have data to tell us why, but we very strongly suspect that the other thing that started happening in 2018 was the Isle of Palms cleanup crew started paying a lot of attention to litter, talking it up, and giving people the opportunity to do something about it. And I can remember, as I mentioned, I have been to many of those sweeps even from the beginning, and I can say just from my own personal experience, I remember a lot of people talking about what the litter was they were picking up, and cigarette litter was a topic of conversation right from the beginning. And so I really think that although we won't ever know why that was already starting to decline before the ban went in place, I don't think we can overstate the importance of the Isle of Palms cleanup crew on that trend. So thank you for that as well. The other thing that we can start to talk about now, as Susan talked about, that in the 2022, we started doing a definite effort at looking at the streetscape separate from the beach. And so just looking at this information, there's a lot of numbers here. You don't have to get too hung up on them, but I will just explain that the yellow column is the beach numbers, the blue column is the road numbers, and the numbers come from the Isle of Palms Cleanup Crew events, mostly Breakfast Club and Monday night beach sweeps, but also some of those special event sweeps like the Bishop England sweeps. They were also divided up and they did some of the road and some of the beach. And those combined together, you can look at the total debris and the smoking totals, and you come up with a very high consistency in the proportion of smoking debris that's being found in the beach and the roads, even only using this portion of the data set, which is 90% of all the data. So it makes sense that it would be very close. Somebody mentioned, I'll get to that. So litter reduction recommendations that we have, I really just want to echo a lot of what Susan said. But number one, most important one, ordinances. It's really, really important. Isle of Palms, again, was the leader in the plastic pollution efforts. And in order to stay in the lead on that, we really need people to stop breaking your rules. And the only way to get people to do that is that they know they're going to be held accountable. So we really echo the recommendation to start going around and warning people and maybe even giving a ticket or two, because I think once people realize that you're not messing around, you mean it when you say it, it'll stop. The word will travel and people will stop doing this. So I think that could make a real impact there. We also want to encourage the consistent messaging at all the beach accesses. Not everybody enters the beach from the 1100 block, but so having some of those there will really help. Adding more no toys left behind bins I think is a great idea as well, because as Susan mentioned, 1,500 toys picked up and thrown in the trash is too much for one no toy left behind bin. We also encourage the positive messaging on the welcome signs is really helpful. Every single person who drives in across the connector sees those signs, and that really helps people be aware if they're not getting it from any other source. Coordination in the future with rental property managers and hotels for consistent litter messaging is probably a pretty easy kind of low-hanging fruit to get the word out to folks, especially all the visitors that come in to town and don't necessarily know all of the rules going on. And additional funding for public works to do litter cleanups. Susan had mentioned that one already. And the biggest one that I want to leave you with is increased engagement with the island businesses to be supporting the local ordinances, communicating these litter trends that we've been talking about, and encouraging sustainable packaging. This particular graphic here is it's the one pager that the city of Charleston, the county, and James Island all use because they have all concurrent ordinances. And it's the one that they put together to help their businesses get ready to make the move to when they banned those single-use products. This is out there. It's available, and you guys probably already have one of your own that's very similar. But if you don't have to recreate the wheel. This stuff is right here. And encouraging the businesses to get back to following the rules is really going to be important and critical and needs to be done, because there's more work to be done on this litter front. And finally, promoting the litter reduction practices such as carry out accessories on request rather than giving everything to everybody who places an order will do a lot for minimizing the stuff that's just going to get thrown away immediately because they didn't need it anyway. And also, as someone mentioned, the outdoor smoking receptacles at some of the venues. We would be happy to help work with anybody here to identify some of the hot spots for some of those cigarette smoking litter areas. And so at that point, I think having receptacles at those other places would be a huge help to doing that. So that's all I have. If you have questions, I'm happy to take them.
It just sounds like we have still so much litter. I mean, imagine if we didn't have all the volunteers, what it would look like. It just amazes me. Litter is, a lot of it's human behavior. very difficult to change human behavior, so thank goodness we have volunteers, because, you know, the beaches would look terrible. They just look
Right.
horrible out there.
Right. It's also that every year there's more and more people too, right? And so it's not, and then there's more construction, there's more houses being built. It's not going away, and so, yeah, we have to stay on top of it, but we also have to like always know there's never going to be zero, right? But hopefully it'll be less than 12%. So
You showed some of the distribution geographically on the island. How much of this, like, do the cleanups go up into wild dunes? Or you don't? Okay, so we don't know when.
no, the cleanups are mostly at Front Beach,
Okay.
based out of Front Beach, except for the satellite group that did go to Breach Inlet on those occasions, in several occasions. But some of the groups, some of the dots that you saw in other places on the island were individuals. Some people swept by kayak. Some people are residents, and they always kind of sweep in their area. Some people are turtle team members, and we've had some of those in the past put in data near wild dunes. So that's what that comes from.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah.
Howard, did you want to speak? Come on down.
Well, good evening, everybody.
Hello.
I don't know if I need the microphone or not, but I wanted to share something that I did the other day down here at Isle of Palms. I came down here on February 25th, and we call that the winter, the slow time, and I walked Ocean Boulevard, and I normally start up by parking by the sea turtle statue area and walking normally all to the way down to the Windjammer and back. That's my normal path. And that day in February, I only found 241 cigarette butts to pick up
Jeez.
in the winter.
That's it?
And let's see here. I probably got a couple cigar tips in here someplace.
What would you find in the summer? Was that different from the summer, or is it about the same as the summer?
I'm sorry?
Is that about the same as the summer?
Oh, summer explodes.
It would be even a lot more?
I've done in the past where I've done from the sea turtle, the Windjammer and back, and sometimes I've had Linda with me documenting, and I picked 400 or 500 up easily. Now, I did a sweep the other day down here, another sweep. Oh, I lost it. And I started, this was after my surgery I just had, and I started at the Windjammer and worked up to the flagpoles, up and back. That was it. I was recovering, let's see, this was about a week after my heart surgery I had, and I picked up 126 cigarette butts that day. Gosh. And the thought is, if I don't pick them up, or if they don't get picked up by somebody, where do they end up? They end up downstream. And that cigarette butt, people have told me that cigarette butt is biodegradable. It's not. It has cellulose acetate in it, about 1,000 to 1,200 pieces. And all that does is break down into microplastics. It's all it does. And, you know, when I play a game, I like to win. When I taught school, I taught toward the end of my career, I taught problem-solving engineering. And when the kids got their results or their project done, they thought they were a failure. I said, no, you were successful. You learned what didn't work. Let's try something else. So I just leave that as an open-ended thought.
Howard, does your data show any reduction after the smoking ban that you can tell?
I can't hear what he's saying.
I can say, yeah. So if you look at the chart that's included in the packet, it shows after the smoking ban,
Significant.
it went down from being 28% of all litter to 21%.
And that's 30%, or that's all of his data and your data combined. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I go out and I do environmental cleanups every day. Isle of Palms is one of my targets. The boat landings in Berkeley County are part of my targets. The 5 beaches in Berkeley County are my targets. So I aim everywhere. And, coming down here, and, it'd be nice to go do a sweep and have nothing to pick up except for the loose change, I find. That'd be wonderful. And if it's there, I'm gonna find it. What's so sad is, trying to educate people to, you wanna have, like Linda said, a positive note, but sometimes you have to go the other way, you have to go the other way. And I guess it's the schooling thinking, but when I was asked today to speak to a elementary school coming up, I was doing a sweep at Azalea Park in Somerville today. Doing Azalea Park, Quarterman Park in Somerville, Quarterman Park. Only 430 cigarette butts I picked up in an hour. And the elementary school teachers asked me to come, and I gave my information to come speak to their classes. I said I would. But, it's just amazing to see my journey every day down here. And it's nice to be able to work with the aquarium people, Susan, the Isle of Palms, and to be part of that cleanup crew. It's so rewarding to see the young kids coming in, the young kids, the elementary school kids, but even the older teenagers to come down and get the experience to get their community service hours. That's important. And teach them that new skill, teach them a lifelong habit to get into. That's just so important. But the work will continue. I think the work is going to be nonstop. It's going to be, I think, a busy summer for us. And it's so nice to be able to work with everybody from the aquarium and all the people that participate with the cleanup crew here. I would invite you all to come out one Monday night in the summer and participate.
Thank you. Can I ask, has there been any talk about more enforcement on the regulation about smoking? Or the police department, or?
Did you ask who to talk to? How do we send
Yeah,
that?
has that already been brought up in the past? I mean, I know there were some issues with personnel and, how many people do you have and what thing are they going to target for enforcement? But I can't remember if that's something we talked about last year or.
We could ask to talk to the chief about it. That would be my suggestion. I don't think that I recall specifically this group advising on stepping up enforcement, but I think that would be a next step. I know it's a touchy subject, from a PR standpoint to issue tickets for somebody smoking, but that would be, I think we would defer to him on that.
So, Douglas, I know there was a new guy hired for code enforcement, so the smoking is not part of.
No, yeah,
That's
that
more-
would be a beach services officer.
Okay.
He's not doing the
Yeah.
Up and down on the beach.
Douglas, is the smoking ban in effect where Howard picks up all those butts on Ocean Boulevard? You can't smoke outside on Ocean Boulevard? He's talking about the street, and that's not banned, is it?
That's correct. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying you went in
Not
at
on the beach.
went in. You're not going to the beach in that area. You're doing Ocean Boulevard in that area.
That was Ocean Boulevard.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was just, Ocean Boulevard. Also, too, I want to thank Kelly for kind of inviting me to start doing this. She's the one that started the monster, and working with Linda, and then to pair up with Susan. It's been such a great activity. I want to announce two things that are going to happen in the future, and I'd like to invite everybody to them. I don't know when, but they're going to happen. The first one will be my 2000 sweep, when I do my 2000th. And the next big thing will be my millionth item. I did my half-millionth item on the beach that day, and kind of neat. Linda was with me documenting, and it was if I'm not mistaken, it was a static dryer sheet that I picked up, my half-millionth item off the beach. But the one thing too, it's nice to get out there, and it's nice to be able to, when I'm on the beach, to talk to people. And when Linda and I were doing the sweeps together, and I'm out there, it's really neat to see the little kids gather around and pick up trash. They like doing that. So it's inspiring the next generation to keep the beach clean.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you, Howard, and we're glad you're one of our targets.
I'm sorry?
We're glad you're one of our targets, the Isle of Palms.
Yeah. Well, you know, the funny thing is, when I first started coming to the beach, I love being on the beach. And I went to the other place on the other side of town. I'm not allowed to say that word. But the parking is terrible, and you catch every light going down, red going down Folly Road. I can't think of the name of the beach anyway, but this is much easier. And from my house to that beach to this beach is only a mile or two difference, and it's much easier to come here. So, you know, it's just, I spread my sunshine here. So,
We thank you.
We're glad
Thank
to have
you.
you. Thank
Can
you.
if you could just indulge me for a minute, Howard, you'll like this too. I've got a quick story, and the purpose of it is to show how far we've come. It wasn't that I've been involved with Hollings Cancer Center for a long time, and a number of years ago, the director of the center and I came to an Isle of Palms City Council meeting trying to persuade the Isle of Palms to put a ban on indoor smoking. And the council was not at all happy about it at that particular moment. And one council member, who shall remain nameless, slammed his hand down and said, "What? The next thing you know, you're gonna ban smoking on the beach." So we've come a long way.
Well, you know what the next step would be is the thought, Ocean Boulevard, municipal parking. To me, that's the extension of the beach. That's the extension of the beach.
Good idea.
You know, and, you know, but only a thought, only a thought. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is going to be old business, and the first report is the wildlife group.
So I have a question, because we're well past our hour of meeting. How long are we going to go tonight? Can we
Yeah.
decide that before we start digging into the agenda?
And I know we've met, I mean, Nicole had a hard stop at 5:20. Do you all feel we've kind of tried to keep it around an hour? We're over an hour already. What's the,
Yeah, so
Do you
I'm not
want-
saying. it
There's
won't-
one item that it has a deadline, the end of March, the triangular signs from NOAA about dolphins and turtles, and could we at least make a decision on that? Because
Perhaps.
they're
Yeah.
waiting for an answer.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting. Can we just go through maybe the agenda, decide what we want to cover tonight and how much longer we want to go? I don't mind staying a little bit longer, but I think the expectation that we're going to try to get through the agenda, we should break that expectation and just cover, what should we cover?
and I would say that the RFP at the end of the agenda also has a deadline to give folks time to respond on that.
Is there anything else that's time sensitive on the agenda?
We have a few, we do have a few things for next month that things are stacking up a little bit on us. But I don't know that really any of them are necessarily that time sensitive. So we can talk about, I do think if we started going through everything on the agenda, I think we would be here beyond kind of a useful time. So I guess my suggestion would be we go to those two things because they have a deadline. Then talk about our next meeting and how to arrange the time for that meeting to avoid running into a crunch.
Sounds good.
It works
Works for me.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
If I may, I had an update on the signs.
Okay.
Do you mind if I share that?
That,
When we
is
get
that,
to that point?
I think that was what you were going to talk about. Is that right, Mary?
Well, yeah.
Is it the same signs? The mammal, dolphin?
triangular.
The dolphin signs? Yeah.
I guess first of all, is everybody, I think you would need,
Well, can we cover it from our angle first and then see where are we with the
everybody
signs?
agreeable to reordering the agenda to just have those two items, which would be 6, well, it would be the next item on the agenda. 6I, and then down to 7. Are we good with just doing those two tonight?
Yeah, so. if
Yes,
we
and
need- we
there's
need-
one more timely thing I'd just like to mention quickly, so.
Okay.
and I can do it now, I guess, if that is amenable.
We're in suspense.
So Mount Pleasant Town Council, City Council, Town Council is going to be voting on this coming council meeting about a green commission. So sort of their equivalent of what we're doing here. It's going to be up for discussion. You know, it's not a done thing by any means. I think it'd be great if the folks on this committee could just reach out and let council members know in Mount Pleasant, you know, some of what we've done, how we function, the use that we think we provide, just provide the information to the Mount Pleasant folks ahead of their decision.
When is that happening?
I believe Monday night is their council meeting.
All right, so do we need a motion on the agenda change? Or
No, I think it's, I think it actually is, well, yeah, you are eliminating some things from the agenda, so you probably do want to reorganize the agenda to
So-
include 6I and 7, and then postpone discussion of the rest of the items.
So I'll bring a motion to postpone all the elements of the agenda for 6 and what was it?
So you're gonna
6I and
take
7.
up 6I and 7
And
and
then-
postpone the rest.
And then we'll postpone the rest
Till your
until
next
next meeting.
Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we start with 6, okay, turn it back over to our chairperson.
Right. Do you want me to tell them about this email from Lauren?
Yes, so we're going to talk about the wildlife signage, and I know that Mary had contacted Lauren and with some questions specifically about what could be included on the signage, and so we're going to talk about that just a little bit, and then have some discussion about how we want to move forward. Or
All right. Actually, Lauren sent me an email with a copy to Sandy and Douglas about the dolphin viewing signs, answering the questions that we had for her that she was going to find out about. The first question was, could the 2 signs that we could get free from NOAA have different text? And she said possibly to some degree, but not significantly different, because these are funded by NOAA. The text has to be approved by NOAA. The current text has already been approved and already includes turtles. And the second question we had for her was, can we do one side dolphins, one side turtles, and one side shorebirds? She said one of the panels already includes turtles, and we could probably add a bottom panel additional sea turtle information, but it would have to be approved by NOAA. And she doesn't think that they will add shorebirds because they're not federally protected under NOAA. Now, SCDNR is the agency that does the shorebirds. So we can't, she doesn't think we can put anything about shorebirds on there. Third question we had was, if they get placed in the sand, does OCRM need to be involved? And she says, this has not come up in the other locations we were looking at because they were managed by the county or town government. I believe this would only come into play in the sand in an area not managed by IOP. And the fourth question was, can we add more pictures and less text? And she says yes, to some extent. Let's see, and finally, are there more funds for more signs? And she says, there might be money available in the summer, and this is a good time to ask, but we would need a firm commitment and install date to include in a proposal. How many would the town want? So she does say that this offer to us to get these signs at free of cost only goes until the end of March, and that's why she's waiting for an answer for us after tonight's meeting. So, any ideas?
so has there been any discussion about having that sign be part of the conservation station? Or would that be appropriate?
This did come up at the last meeting, and that I don't think they're not really going to fit with what we were hoping for, which is more of a kid-friendly.
Gotcha.
We already had kind of a hopes and dreams
For the-
for what
for
we're
the
going to
rec-
do.
Susan,
But
for the record, you maybe just again introduce yourself, because this is a new topic, just to
Oh.
so-
Oh, I'm sorry, Susan Smith, with Isla Palms Cleanup Crew, and because I was here and helped introduce Lauren to you all, and there was discussion too about the marina. I just wanted to add that I happened to wind up talking to the new marina manager this past weekend at a meet and greet, and went ahead and mentioned this. I didn't know if anybody else he had not heard of the offer of the sign, but we had discussed the potential of it going in at the marina, or at least one of the signs that the Low Country Marine Mammal Network was offering, and he was very open to it. In fact, we had a great conversation about all the proactive things that they're doing as part of their renovation, which would be great if you could have him come talk to you about what they're doing to eliminate packaging and their takeout and all sorts of great stuff. But he was very open to the idea of having one of the signs there. Not to say that it's a yes, because he hasn't. In fact, I haven't shared the design with him, but there's definite interest there, and I still think it would be a great location.
Thank you.
I was thinking, what do y'all think about having one sign at the marina and one on the city property near the parking lot at Breach Inlet, even if we can't put it out on the beach where the dolphins actually feed?
So I guess I would just personally say, in my time with the city, there seems to be a constant kind of push and pull, and I think I mentioned it at the last meeting, with just visual clutter at these beach accesses. We have, and it comes up. It seems like it comes up each kind of year to reduce the number of signs. We have had a very concerted effort to put all of the signs onto one cohesive-looking post and sign with multiple signs to get them into a cohesive look. Maybe it's just a personal thing, but I do feel like this sign is contrary to years-long effort to reducing visual clutter. Additionally, I think we already have this group's sign on that sign at Breach Inlet. We knew that it was a location, and we worked with the group to include their sign. It's a much smaller sign, obviously, but from my perspective, and I'm one person on the staff, but I feel like it has been a pretty strong effort to reduce the number of signs, and quite frankly, it also looked like a very large sign. I mean, it clearly was intended to be attention-getting, and I think it is, but I think it would be at odds with what we've tried to do of having a cohesive look to the
I
signs.
concur, just because of signage. The messaging is important, the education is important. It's wonderful that they're offering us something for free. It's hard for me to pass up free stuff, but I really worry that we are getting cluttered with signs, and we're trying to clean the beach. Just my opinion.
Well,
And
'cause
it feels kind of rushed. We just learned about it last month, and we haven't really had time to see a mock-up or what it would actually look like and where it would go. And it just may be something we ought to think about at another time. I know that it's a deadline, but there may be other opportunities at the end.
I agree.
Yeah, I
think
mean,
you
if
need
we
be
had to go
judicious.
to, if we had to go to a vote tonight, I would probably vote against it, just because I don't feel informed enough to make a decision. So I kind of agree.
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think if we're going to try and have some educational component, I think we need to be really judicious and mindful of the overall aesthetic. So if there is something like Susan was sharing that looks, the things that come out of the aquarium are beautiful and very educational, but if we're looking at doing a couple other things, I think it should kind of fit an island-wide theme and kind of perhaps that kind of aesthetic and that kind of feel. It seems like higher quality rather than just a metal tripod stuck in the ground. It's great information, but I think it's going to be overcluttered. I agree.
Okay.
I can go along with that. Yeah.
All right. So I don't think we don't need to take a vote, do we? Can we just move on to
Not
the next item
yeah,
for
I think
discussion?
so.
Okay, all right. So I think then the next item for discussion is the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan RFP.
Yes, I included this in your packet. I felt like this group would be interested to know about this effort. And this is a project that is in the city's budget to do this year. It's also a goal included in the city's draft comprehensive plan to do. I will say that we don't have a tremendous, it's either $20,000 or $30,000 to do this plan, so it's not going to be, you see some of these that are done that are volumes thick. We're not anticipating that level of detail, and you can tell that by the amount of money in the budget to do it. But I've included it on the agenda to just get your feedback on it. And I'll say there's a lot of boilerplate request for proposals type information there. But to just walk through the expectation, and it really gets into the scope of work and the deliverables in that scope of work. The first task would be information gathering. That's part of the challenge that we have is all of this information. There's a lot of it out there. It's hard to have one central kind of housekeeping place where it's all sitting in the same location. It's kind of pulling some information from the state, some from the federal government, some from the county, some from the city's ordinances. So they would pull all of the relevant information together. We have localized plans. And then they would provide a background report with a series of interviews that they would have done with stakeholders. I would anticipate the group would come here, talk to this group. I also think they would talk to the Planning Commission. They've been engaged in infrastructure and environmental issues. So, but we're also asking them to tell us. We obviously don't do these plans, so we're going to rely on their expert opinion on which stakeholders we should engage, interview those stakeholders, have a series of meetings, pull all of that information together, and give us a background report. The second task would be after they've pulled it all together, they would develop a draft plan. So that would be analyze what they've pulled together, present us back with a plan of sorts, and identify goals and strategies of what they think our goal should be in the long range. And of course, this is very kind of long range planning that we would expect. It's not going to be immediate projects, but it's a long range vision. Once those draft plans get presented, talked about, we would expect that they would be refined. There would be budgets put to those, and then there would be a final plan and set of strategies that would get presented along with, they're going to be, for what we're paying, they're going to be very rough guesses of cost. They're not going to be based on fully engineered solutions, but it would be a high-level plan of, these are your community's vulnerabilities. We think it's primarily in our infrastructure, that as we deal with rising tides, it's going to heavily impact our infrastructure. So we would expect that the plan would have goals, strategies, and projects to address that. So that's really, at the end of the day, what the project would be. As I said, the rest of it would be it's kind of boilerplate, how we request proposals from professional firms. The rest of it's fairly boilerplate.
Who's the bidders list? Who would you send it out to?
So we have engaged the Sea Grant Consortium in terms of who they have partnered on a number of these. They have some lists. They have compiled plans that other communities have done. We have lists of other people who have done them. So we have a handful of consultants that we have already worked with. We certainly will send those out. So we'll try to cast the net as widely as we can, get as many interested people as we can.
And what-
We do think that what we've done in the past is we've used the planning commission as a grading. They've kind of been a grading agency to try to give us, give the city a list in order priority of qualified responders. So that's the plan with this one. They identify who they think would be best. The staff then goes away and will negotiate cost and to see if we can come to an agreement, and then it would go to council for consideration. So that's kind of the process. Once we put it out, we'd bring them in, grade them, best or worst.
Typical bid evaluation
Yeah.
process. Now, the one thing I didn't see or hear is risk evaluation. Is there any consideration of risk?
I would think, I mean, I guess I see that as identifying our vulnerabilities.
Yeah, but identifying, how are they gonna identify the vulnerabilities and what's the risk? I mean, generally in something like this, you would rate the risks, rate them, prioritize them, and then they would help you decide on where you go with your planning. One of the concerns I would have, and I've done a lot of these engineering studies, is, you know, you're doing it at a lower cost. You know, they're just gonna take, in the old days, what we used to do is you just cut it from somebody else's report, paste it on the paper, and the typist would type it away. So for that kind of cost, we could get a boilerplate something. So, you know, it would be nice to know that they're specifically not just taking some other island's typical risks and doing it, and then also identifying, when they identify the vulnerabilities, what is the risk? Because there's each one is going to have a different level of risk. You know, and when you look at risk, you tend to look at consequence. What's the likelihood of it happening, and what's the consequence of it happening? So to have some level of risk evaluation on the vulnerabilities, I think is important. I don't know what that does to scope.
So you're thinking that risk and vulnerabilities are two different things?
Well, no, vulnerabilities are okay, but putting them in context of risk, what's the likelihood of this could happen, and what's the consequence if it does happen, is typically how you look at these types of things. The higher the higher the likelihood it could happen, the higher the consequences tends to put you where you're at. When you do a risk assessment like this, you normally will say, you know, I have a scale of 1 through 5. Lightest consequence is a 1, heaviest consequence is a 5, and then I have my probability. The highest likelihood of it happening is a 5. The lowest likelihood is a 1. You multiply those together, and if anything that you get a 25, you're going to focus on the 25 first. So by putting them in a context of a risk assessment, you can compare the different vulnerabilities to each other, and it helps you decide where to prioritize and where to spend your money and your time and how you can do that. So I think, you know, suggesting maybe that they use some sort of methodology for evaluating the different vulnerabilities from a risk standpoint would be helpful.
Yeah, that certainly was our expectation, that's what
Yeah.
they would be doing.
Yeah.
So maybe I can bolster the language there to make that
And
clear
if
that it's in
you want to
context of
try
it.
something and send it back, I can look at it on email as well, but, you know, that would be helpful, you know.
Okay,
Douglas, I have
Yes.
just one quick comment too.
Yeah.
On the first page, under what the plan and the project will include,
Yep.
you mentioned a qualitative cost-benefit analysis of identified adaptation measures. So I was thinking that you might want to say a quantitative cost-benefit analysis in order
Is
to
that
get
the word
your-
I meant? Quantitative.
So you'll have your numbers, because it sounds like you're wanting numbers there, right?
Yes, yep.
Now, you can get qualitative data from your focus group, so I don't know if you want to have a separate item for that. But if you want to get cost-benefit numbers, you know, then
We
you would
want
want to say
quantitative
quantitative
cost-benefit.
data.
Great
Yeah.
catch.
Yep.
That's a
Yeah.
really important, yeah, because qualitative, you're just going to get.
It's one word, but it can
Yep,
be important. Yeah.
thank you.
I have one quick question
Sure.
too, that you may have answered, I apologize. But I assume other coastal communities, like in the beach group that have done work like this, has there been any contact with other communities about which providers they may have experience with, or, you
So
know?
we've done that through the Sea Grant Consortium. Seems to be tied to at least some of the communities around us that have done it.
Okay,
And we're in contact with them. They're also reviewing this request. So yes, we think by, and we have found, we have access and we have in our possession most, if not all, of the ones that have been done around us. That was, we were hoping to be able to send them this request and have them propose for us as well. So we're in contact with them.
In collaboration. Good.
Yep.
Great.
Good, wonderful. Thank you.
Any other suggestions for the RFP? Okay, so let's move on to.
That's it.
Yeah? Did you have something, Douglas?
Not on that. We're going to move on to
That's
future
it.
meetings.
Yes, I was
Just
going to
a-
talk
just-
about
just a quick statement.
miscellaneous business.
Just a quick statement. I think doing this is great because,
good.
you know, what we talked about over here was what they call climate mitigation, which is how do you get the CO2 temperature down? Or adaptation is, we already got issues, so how are we going to manage the risk of those issues? So I think that's great that we're looking at both sides of this. And the adaptation is the one, you know, now you're talking, you know, the flooding, the more frequent hurricanes, those types of things. So this, it's very good that we're doing this.
So, under miscellaneous business, for next time, do we want to hold off on having any presentations for next time so that we can get through some of the goal setting that we've,
I would think so. We
because
had
it will be April, and I just
I
feel
think
like we need to
PFAS
get
is in
that.
May, right?
Well, we had talked about PFAS in April, I think, but I think we want to.
We pushed it to May, right? The
Okay.
commitment we got?
We also have, we had talked to Elizabeth Fisher about potentially coming in April. I would say that we wanted her kind of in the 6-month window, which I think was April. But I would say that we would delay her as well. I don't know that she's going to have a huge update, so it's up to you all.
I think
but-
we need a business meeting in April is what we're saying, no speakers, because we've got still some of the goals to go through. We've got things we postponed.
So
Yeah.
postpone those two.
And then Jonathan was able to secure us, we switched up our thinking on the PFAS thing, and we said, let's pick someone from DHEC with that. So Jonathan was able to find someone, and so DHEC is gonna come in and speak on PFAS for us in May. So that would be our next speaker.
PFAS.
Okay.
And they've already made that commitment is to have someone come down, so I'd hate to postpone that.
Might be virtual. I don't know if they're going to come
Might be
down.
virtual, but yeah, they're willing, they're committed to deliver it.
So that would have us doing really just old business, what we have on old business, and
Right.
plus the Beach Advocates takeaway
Yes,
for next meeting.
yes.
You
Does
think
that
that's
sound
probably enough?
good? Yeah,
Yeah, I think so too.
yeah.
And then
Yeah,
we'll
that's-
do
that'll be good.
PFAS and the Fisher update at the next meeting after that.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Is there a motion to
I
adjourn?
move the meeting be adjourned.
A second.
Nay.